Hello, everyone. Max Mullen. I'm very happy to be giving this talk to you today from France. I'm very glad that Nottingham Trent and Strate invited me to give this talk because it's a topic of my research that is very important to me, and I'm very looking forward to see what you're gonna deliver after your workshop. So I'm gonna share my screen and in the just take notes. We'll see in the afternoon when we can have a little talk to answer your questions. And I hope I will be crystal clear. Um, Maybe you can pause the video when you need or watch it again. Anyway, let's start. I'm gonna share my screen and yes. Okay, it's working. Cool. So hello, enchanté. I'm Max Mullen. I have, let's say, three pairs of glasses through which I look at the world. I'm a lecturer in Sciences Po in Paris. I'm a PhD in design and media studies, and I have a practice of speculative design since 2010. But also, I need to tell you where do I talk when I start this little conference. Um, because I'm a pragmatist, so it means that I believe my situations, my worldview influences everything I see and do, even if I tend to be objective as a researcher. Um, Therefore, I wear those three pairs of glasses, but I also wear a specific pair of eyes that gives me a specific point of view on the topic of conflict. And this pair of eyes saw the havoc of conflict and war in my mother's country in Lebanon. I also experienced racism in France, which, in my own opinion, is actually a form of conflict that has been wrongly framed. And I also witnessed the power and the flaws of democracy when I was living in Switzerland. Um, I'm lucky enough to have received an artistic education in Villefontaine, south of France, in Nottingham Trent, yes, back in 2008 in graphic design, and in Geneva, and then in Paris for my PhD. And this allowed me to respect and enhance um, my taste for weirdness and difference. And that's also where came from my interest in norms and how to stand out of it and how to be out of the ordinary, to be bizarre in many fields, from creativity to cuisine, from neurodiversity to gender queerness. And my worldview is on the question of conflict is the following. A world that praises alterity, difference, that places the bonding and the respect of our agreement is a world that decreases the amount of violence and competition and increase solidarity and justice, which is what Latour, Bruno Latour, calls composing common worlds. And that's, I think, that's where I talk when I start this presentation, which is entitled this way: Design for Debate or Design Fiction for Debate. Um, so this talk will be a little bit about speculative futures. So if you are familiar with design fiction, speculative design, and so on, you won't be lost. But I'd rather talk about design for debate, and you will see why in a minute. That's today's menu. We'll zoom out with in the first part about conflict. Then we'll zoom in um, my own designer's role uh, towards this notion of conflict. Then we'll zoom out again to try to have a larger view in the question. And are you ready? Let's go. Conflict. A good way to start with this topic is to play with this little cartoon there. It's written on the left part, please, madame, cover up, dress up. This is forbidden to be naked. On the right part, it's written, undress, madame. It's forbidden to be dressed this way on the sea front. Um, with this little cartoon, what I say is that from the moment we live in communities, we live together, disagreement is uh, is about how to live arise. It means that, and actually that's a saying from Chantal Mouffe, the political philosopher, that says that as soon as we are together, some tension arises. It's part of being together. That's why she makes the difference between politics, which is the antagonism inherent in collective life, and politics, which is actually a job. That's the work of dealing with the collective. Based on this, um, some thinkers like Habermas have said that the process of deliberation based on argumentation is always a solution to those tensions. But according to Chantal Mouffe, um, democracy is actually an illusion in the way it's done right now, and governance too. Um, whether whatever the topic is, those processes are always based on the same mechanism, which is the law of the bigger number. Um, the problem is that marginalized people unite to make their voices heard, and slowly, then they create a bigger group, and we result in this kind of situations back in 2022 with the elections in France. I mean, that's the argument of Chantal Mouffe. Um, and on the question of why is it essential then to do something about this as a designer, um, the answer for Chantal Mouffe is that um, the consensus um, is part of the problem. The fact that um, the consensus is imposed on the others. And actually, Chantal Mouffe thinks designers have a role to play with this consensus. I'm gonna explain. Um, and to explain this, it's a good start to check Herbert Simon's definition of design, which is that everybody designs who devises a courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. But the question is preferred for whom when you see this kind of artifact that has been designed in front of uh, maybe a banking building. And when you see this version, which is the pay and sit bench from the German designer Fabian Brunzing, um, with this one, design can help to bring the preferable into discussion. And this stance, this role for designers is actually what we can call to be a diplomat. Um, the diplomat is not someone who brings peace, but someone who questions values, including the values of those who sent them there. in the first place. In this sense, their task is above all to intensify conflicts. Um, you've got the reference below. So that's based on Latour, but also back to Chantal Mouffe, uh, and then I will stop with theoretical questions, and we'll start looking at actual design projects. But um, back to Chantal Mouffe. Um, Chantal Mouffe says that if democracy is an illusion, artist and designer can do something about it, which is to try to spice up those moments when conflicts arise, because those conflicts are not only about rational argument, they're also about emotions, um, and designers and artists know how to deal with this complexity of the human fabric. Um, and she advised that designers can open spaces for um, spaces to be something else than enemies, to be more like adversaries. And adversaries come from the Greek agon, which become the word agonism, which means to produce an agonistic design, which then invites us to think the space between hasty consensus and becoming enemies. And in this space is where sits the designers that want to design for debate, which is not talking about open conflict uh, like the war, and neither is talking about design to avoid conflict. Um, it's designed to prevent being enemies and to work through conflict. That's the thing we're going to talk about today. Um, and that's also where design can work for negotiation, compromise, or resolution, like Domus contest says in their brief sheet. Um, I've been thinking about this Domus Academy's challenge, and for me, there was a problem. The problem is that A, there's uh, the fact that a conflict is often the wrong conflict, um, because we argue often for the wrong reasons: mental overload, stress, misunderstanding of the subject. Um, so at the individual level, there's something uh, we should work on. B, once clarified, we can have a substantive debate. It's okay. Um, that's the interpersonal level. That's when the debate actually starts. And C, um, there's the topic of um, who's included in this debate, and how to invite as many as people to care about the topic. Um, but so I try to with this little three little titles. I tried to think about the my view on their brief, and and I decided that um, I would try to get back to this little three titles at the end of the presentation, to give a kind of framework for conflict. And my own interest in all this is the is actually the one of the first question I gave, the individual level, and the second one also. Um, that could be summarized with this question: why does a conflict spiral out of control? Thus, we don't know how to manage it, and we tend to avoid it. And one answer to this question is that one answer to this question of us being so intensely involved when a conflict arises, when someone disagrees with us. One of the answers is that we we behave this way, or we feel this way because conflict upsets us if we disagree, because we feel rejected by the other person. And in turn, we tend to disqualify the other person and their opinions. And why do we do this? We do this because we want to remain part of the group. We want to remain the norm. We want to save face, but we want to be the group. This is what Michel Foucault calls normalization. And the challenge is to find the right conditions to create bonds with others, with otherness, with strangeness. And this was one of the topic of my thesis. Therefore, I focused on how to design situations proper to have a debate. So this is this title there in bold. Um, and let's then move on the answers I give to this topic. So, my with this little title there, finding a designer's role, I want to introduce my own trajectory on how I found, let's say, not an answer, but a way to work with design on those topics. And this started in during a job placement in big tech companies where I was working on the ancestor of the iPad. That was back in 2010. And it was an epic fail because it was not working very well. That's when I moved from being interested about the application of new technologies to the implications of those technologies. And I was lucky enough to meet um, during my studies three people in this collection of pictures, which were James Auger and Jimmy Loiseau from the Royal College of Art, and Nicolas Nova, um, which I pay a tribute now, and because he passed away last year, and it was all in Head, Haute École d'Art et Design in Geneva, where those people brainwashed me with speculative design. That's also when I started working with design for um, not for problem solving, which is something important that comes afterwards, but design for issues raising. And actually, this is conflict anticipation, and this is what it is about today in this talk. That's when I created. I mean, the start of this journey was this project called Dog and Bone, which is a critical and speculative design attempt to create kind of a space or platform for reflection and debate. Um, it was about the future of let's say over distant communication. Um, Back in those days, 2010, the future of this field was pictured like you see right now on your screen. Those part of those pictures came from the MIT Media Lab, for instance, and they were trying to mimic the face-to-face interaction based on the fact that a lot of the non-verbal part of communication was absent. I decided to give my own shot to this question, and I created the Dog and Bone, which is a telephone embedded into a dog collar, and I went quite far. I made the artifact. I found users. I tested it. Those are also users. The dogs are part of the user group.
Le téléphone par l'entremise de ma chienne.
So I won't show you.
Alors, bon week-end et on se parle.
I won't show you the old project, but um, it was. I went until the user test phase, and and I had enough material to start discussions, and quite strong conflicts sometimes happened with people to whom I shown this project. Um, it was triggering conversation. That was the intention. Conversation on, do you prefer to live in the world on the left side of your screen or the right side of your screen? Um, and the problem was, uh, I experienced the usual way to show those projects and the usual way to start debates were to have an exhibition, and it didn't work. It didn't work at all. Not even journalists picked the proper terms of the debate. So, um, piling up on the other important text that inspired me back in those days, I wrote my own PhD thesis on this topic of designing for debate, and I had a PhD defense in Paris. And based on this publication, I made different other publications to vulgarize, to make it more, to popularize those practices in France. Either it would be in medias, on in academic spheres, academic realms. And based on this PhD, I developed different practices. I will now go through those four very quickly, just to finish showing you the trajectory that led me to this thinking I'm presenting to you. The first one was Design Fiction Club. Uh, it was in Gaieté Lyrique, which is a cultural center in Paris. Um, the Design Fiction Club was an open seminar, participatory seminar out of the university, part of my PhD thesis, where we would discover a lot of projects, get used to debates together, build up a community, and we had 23 um, um, evenings, 3 seasons. There are 3 of the 10 videos that are available online. Um, and second project in Sciences Po, which is the political sciences school in Paris. I was head of the contemporary controversy workshop, which would mix 3 disciplines to study emerging controversies. It was controversy mapping, imaginaries, sociology of the imaginaries, and anticipation, forecasting, foresight. I would frame this as design fiction. And we would combine those 3 to give better formulation, better understanding of topics that would usually raise conflicts or that could raise conflicts in order to make better debates. Um, Here, for instance, we translated 687 report of 4 sites made in France on the different trajectory that France could take in the future concerning carbon neutrality, zero carbon emission. And we translated this into, in this report, there were 4 categories, 4 scenarios. We translated it into 4 blog posts from an influencer, uh, of 2050, living in 2050. So um, this those articles, those blog posts were actually illustrated with design fictions. Um, so here you've got 4 versions of a world instead of reading 687 pages. What If was the third project. It was my former company, and we we would take topics. We would do the same thing then with the courses, but among professionals. One of the project was to explore the future of France beyond the elections, depending on the votes, and we would also invite scientists to face the future they are actually making possible, the future that are encapsulated, that are embedded into their researches, we would allow people to face future in live theater forms, or to participate to let's say popular participatory foresight workshops. I won't detail much. And what I'm doing right now is that I created an independent research lab called the Deviations Lab, and I will talk about this in the end of my presentation. And that is the team. Cool. Through this trajectory, I found and I tried to develop a role for designers, which is being a diplomat. And that's Isabelle Stengers that suggested, that coined this term uh, just before, and together with Bruno Latour. And beyond the PhD, I tried to actually develop this stance, this role, through practice. But this is not new. And now in the next section, we're gonna take a look back in the history of those design practice that does not solve problems. Um, and this history is quite occidental, I have to say. It is based on those reference if you're looking for them on the internet. And we're gonna check mainly the back in the days, but very quickly, then a little focus on the last 20 or 10 years, and then look at today, right now. And doing this history is actually looking at this the political awareness, the rise of the political awareness in design. Um, just for fun, because I hated the history classes, because I never understood very much. It was hard to have to feel the experience of what was happening back in the days. I like to place those little pictures of the time back in the days, the time I'm talking about. So back in those days, where we were riding horses and building the Crystal Palace in 17 weeks, which must have been something crazy for those people. Yeah, just look at how the contrast between people riding horses and this crazy building. We have a picture of it, but it's quite later, when it has been moved to a different place in London. Back in those days, what made um, those progress possible was specific conditions for workers that you can see in these pictures. The age expectancy for people, workers, back in those days were the age of 30. And this was called the social question. Um, and this situation, the fact that design was promising a world where everybody can have access to comfort, but at the cost of the lives of workers, is the root cause of the ambiguous relationship between design and industry that is still live today. But someone pushed pause and to the start of this crazy explosion of progress, and it was William Morris, English artist, designer, activist, thinker, who believed that it was necessary to completely rethink the relationship between human and art and machines. And his mentor, Professor John Ruskin, was the first to express concern about the poor working conditions of those factory workers, and the fact that they would live in extreme poverty, while at the meantime they were the one responsible of filling shops with goods that they could not even buy themselves. So William Morris wrote this novel called News from Nowhere, which is maybe one of the first design fiction. If we, and I will let you check it online, and then we're gonna fly over for the through time quickly, through the age, and in the 60s, you can see something similar happening. This group, the radical design group, are people who who frame their work as radical design. Were producing this kind of project in response to disillusionment with the promises of industry, the fact of bringing comfort to everyone, actually, but also the fact because it was standardizing. The fact of trying to bring comfort to everyone was standardizing taste, and with these beds, they that you see there in the pictures, the group tried to actually break the standardized taste uh, and actually to ruin the good taste of bourgeois interiors. That's how they framed their intention. And then we jump again later in time, in the 1990s, we're with another label, Drug Design in the Netherlands, while the previous one was mainly in Italy. There, with this chest of drawers, which is totally recycled, the design try to make you think, the designers try to make you think about the wastefulness of capitalism. And we jump again 10 years later, in the years 2000, with the rise of this label, critical design. And here, designs tries to question what lies hidden in our everyday objects, how they are made. And we see on the right side, as an example, this paranoiac surveillance camera that is shutting down every time it sees someone. So with a lot of humor, this project are trying to make us think. And then 2010, we've got a speculative design, where design explores the future of science and technology, and all these hidden problems. Um, and those are just very quickly shown. Same years, in the 2010s, design fiction also is coined by Julian Blicker, while critical design was coined by Dunn and Raby there in the picture, in the Royal College of Art. Same thing for speculative design. And design fiction tries to also make us think about technologies, but more in the everyday life, in the customs, in the practices, in the banality of life. And just to be not only talking about Occidental practices, I show this work from Kenji Kawakami, but it's not part of this history because it's not intended to actually formulate critical thinking are not in the same role or the same stance of the previous ones. So in my PhD thesis, I numbered 19 terms, 19 different terms that describe similar practices. It's interesting to know that Paola Antonelli, the curator of the MoMA, is one of the person that helped those practices to be very to become very famous through mainly 3 to 4 exhibitions: Safe, Design and the Holistic Mind, Talk to Me, and more recently, Design and Violence. And thanks to those, speculative design became famous. On the other side, Bruce Sterling, the science fiction author and writer in the Wired magazine, made design fiction famous. But if you try to think about the difference between those, um, mainly one of the differences is the type of audience that were reached by those two people. But also the fact that here in design fiction, science fiction was an inspiration for innovation, actually, a kind of way to prototype at low cost without the big budgets of engineering or the massive budgets of Hollywood movies. While yeah, and I'm not diving too much into extracts of sci-fi. But those are the kind of artifacts you can see on the screen through the serial box. Both are design artifacts that are fictions and that could work as prototypes for how we live with those artifacts in the future. On the other side, speculative design were raised differently. It was massively funded at some point in the Royal College of Art based on scientific fundings for what is called public outreach or vulgarisation in France. That was after the what triggered all this is the GMO crisis in Europe, where suddenly scientific communities and policymakers saw that the people were not understanding what the technological progress is because they were too far from science. So a part of the European budget for every scientific project were dedicated to fund artistic projects to make this science society connection, and that's based on this funding that lots of speculative design projects were developed. But they were so critical. That's a lot of conflicts actually arose in those scientific projects. Little break. Is everything all right? I just take a deep breath, stretch if you need it. Okay, let's go. Now that we saw what they have, where those practices come from, and what are the main difference between speculative design and design fiction, we can ask what do those very different practices that we saw very quickly, what do they have in common? And what they have in common is that they have a common trigger. Each decade of designers reacts to the systemic problem of their time. It's a reaction, designer's reaction to a problem that is too big to be solved, either it be poverty or the ethical implications of science. And rather than having the audience, the public, as a user on the very right, like usually for designers' work, or having an exhibition where the audience is aware that actual users exist in the middle. This type of work has the audience imagining a rhetorical user. So this is what is called by Bruce and Stephanie Tharp discursive design. That's the big family in which all those practices falls. And those practices often encourage critical thinking. But it can also be graphic design, like with Greenpeace campaign against Coca-Cola. It can also be in the next video, again, Greenpeace trying to show us a future to make us think about how things could be different. Let's check if the video starts.
People have been told about the effects of climate change for years. But after decades of environmental warnings and debates, they got used to the same old message and lost interest. And if the apathy wasn't bad enough, the situation got...
So in this video, starting here.
30 years, people have been warning us about climate change. At Horizon, we see this as an opportunity. Thanks to our advanced analytics technology, we can now predict precisely what seafronts will look like by the end of the century after the rise of water levels. Using our predictive search engine, we are able to...
Anyway, thanks to their Horizon, you can buy right now your house that would be on the seafront in the future. In those two different campaigns, either Greenpeace is trying to bring collective contestation, so against Coca-Cola, for instance, or mutual contestation, thanks to the second video, because if you check the comments in the sections of the articles who published this video, people disagree a lot. There are conflicts. The video starting conflicts with people thinking it's a great idea, while other thinks is the most terrible one. So the common trigger is the systemic problems of their time, and the common reaction is using fiction to get an audience to participate in a reflective critique of society. But not only. Some other practices are using those discursive design approach to get people persuaded about a specific view. Like here.
To help us get a glimpse into the future of this unfinished world of ours, there has been created for the New York.
So what you see is the view of the pavilion of General Motors expositions called Futurama in New York, World's Fair in 1939.
A vivid tribute to the American scheme of living, whereby individual effort, the freedom to... Here is a highway intersection, highway engineering at its most spectacular.
So back in those days, there were 1939. They had to advocate for people for highways, for people to understand that individual mobility would be the future, and to convince them that it is the future. And it was taking the tools of discursive design. Same thing with Apple, 1980 something, wrote on the screen, where they were showing the iPad, the very first vision of the iPad and the Siri app. But you can find all this online, so I won't spend long on the video.
That's 3 messages. Your graduate research team.
And they're even talking about climate change in the video. So anyway, you have this that totally exists right now. With from Microsoft Future Vision's video to those ones from Corning that are making interactive glass. You've got the idea. And those approaches that are not critical, they inspired a practice called sci-fi prototyping. Here in France, even the Ministry of Defense worked with sci-fi writers in a team called the Red Team in order to imagine the future threat that France could face based on those sci-fi scenarios. So it's also sci-fi prototyping. Yeah, and based on all the things I've shown you, we have to focus on something. And here I want to focus on the practices that challenge the status quo. In the big realm of design for discourse conveying, you've got design for persuasion, which is not what I want to focus on. Design for critical thinking would be the opposite. And in this big box, you have design for collective contestation, which is Greenpeace against Coca-Cola, and design for mutual contestation. That's the one I've been focusing on in my practice and in my research. Is everything still all right for you? I hope so. Breathe again if you need to. And let's move on. I will show you now some of the advices I collected based on my research. And basically those are I could phrase that I reached two main conclusions in my thesis. One is how to better craft. One is about how to better craft artifacts in order to trigger debate. And the other one is how to avoid leaving the debate conditions undesigned. I will start with the last one. And if you want to, it's time to take notes because I'm going to give you pro tips based on 10 plus years of work and experimentation. We'll analyze in depth this project called CRISPR Food. It's on the future of food and especially genetically edited food. So it's not GMO, it's a bit different. It's a technology that has been authorized in the US, not in Europe. But when we were running the project, it was just a couple of months before the law was voted. And we wanted to have a public debate about it. And we planned to have a gigantic, maybe European scale debate at some point. But the European voting process went quite quickly, so we didn't have to do the debate, the big scale debate project. But actually, it could come back because I'm sure this question is going to come again in the future. Because this one of the arguments for this technology is that it could be a solution against let's say difficulties in agriculture because of climate change. But anyway, on this topic, in this project, based on this project, we're gonna discover this model that I came to during the thesis. It's based on 3 big categories. We're gonna go through them one by one, starting with the center. When you want to conduct such project, and you want to avoid undesigning or not designing the situations where people could debate, you could start with defining the issue of your project. Here, the issue was the fact that Europe were not talking at all, and neither in the media nor anywhere. People were not talking about this process, while in the US, and it was like very, very live. There were only one newspaper one time, which were actually not titling very well the question. And the article inside was not really well written. And so the terms of the debate were not clear. Then on the top of choosing choosing an issue, you have to choose also who are the stakeholders of the conversation. Here, we made a big, let's say, collection of arguments coming from the different types of publics, from the agriculture field, from the agriculture industries, from science, etc. And this became a mapping of the controversy based categorized in different topics. For each one of them, there are questions that needs to be addressed in the debate, and every question is subject to become a conflict based on what we analyzed. So that's the issue, where you need a general theme, debatable topics, and at some point actually debated topics if you run a debate. Then the next step is to decide of a fiction, and it always starts with what I call the change hypothesis, a what if, blah, blah, blah. Here it was, what if Europe says yes to this technology? And the game is to explore all the possible consequences of this what if. You imagine a whole world based on this. It's called world building. World building, you see it all the time in movies. Like in Harry Potter, there's a set of rules. There are families, and based on those artifacts and rituals and everyday life situations are built. So for your project and for this project, it's the same thing, based on this what if. So if Europe says yes, then some actors, some stakeholders are going to behave differently. And actually, it already started here. The boss of the Tétinger champagne brand bought land in the south of England in order to have the right conditions to grow his champagne in the future. So if he's doing this move, he could also do other moves if the CRISPR food is authorized. Like he could CRISPR his champagne in order to avoid having to move the vineyard up north. That's the fiction. Then, based on the fiction, you develop artifacts. So based on the mapping of the controversy on the upper left corner, we develop for each debatable topic. Sorry, I'm gonna drink. For each debatable topic, we develop an artifact that is embodying the questions that should be debated. And actually, we made them. We 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 suggested to people to actually eat those fictions, those piece of futures. And then, because it won't be complete if you would stop there, there's the communication situations. So we actually crafted a situation for people to meet. We also invited specific people, so that people representative from the 10 kinds, the 10 types, 10 categories of actors involved and concerned by this topic. We also equipped the public with tools in order to understand what it is about, in order to vote, but also in order to talk to each other without interrupting, with using colors. And we finally used simulation. So we all simulated the fact of being live in 2046, and like if we were trying to, let's say, discuss the conclusion after 20 years living with this technology, discussing what happened and how the world changed. And what you just saw before, those artifacts, those are the artifacts that could exist 20 years in the future. And that's how the simulation worked. People had to play this role. So if I take those three categories: issues, artifacts, and fiction, and then communication situation, this gives this little slide. And in comparison, here, the very first project I've shown you, we had an issue, we had an artifact, and a fiction, which is what if people would actually talk to their dog or through their dog. But we didn't design, we left the communication situation, we just left it to curators to do. And that is a big difference. So it was one of my two findings. In order to talk about the second finding, we'll do it. We'll talk about the don't do. And this one is about how to better craft artifacts in order to trigger debate. So just previously, I proposed to move from the design of artifacts to the design of actually situations, to the design of democratic situations where the future becomes a political issue that is participatory and inclusive. But once taken as a democratic tool, conventional speculative futures projects have many limitations. I listed 6 of them, which are research questions. They are open to the community in my PhD thesis that you can download online. There's a table summarizing them, and in the rest of the thesis, I'm addressing them. Here, I will just focus on a couple of them and especially 3 of them to be short. So let's move on with the thing you should avoid in order to understand how to better craft artifacts in order to trigger debate. Making strange propositions, strange scenarios is a good way to get people involved, to trigger their interest, to make emotions come out. It's also a good way for people to allow themselves to say they disagree on something without being afraid of being rejected by the group, to be out of the norm. But the problem is the way to do it. When you use the codes, the visual codes that are familiar, it's really accessible for people. But when you use cultural visual codes that are too unfamiliar to the audience, you've got a risk of not being understood. You've got the risk of people not being interested about participating. That's the first limitation. Even if the project I just shown could be intended to be the strangest possible, it's not the question here. Then being critical is very important to get people to reflect on what is taken for granted in their lives. But when you formulate those critiques and you remain among experts, then you lack of awareness of your own situations and your own privilege. Here, Burton and Nita, it's quite a famous controversy in the field of speculative design. But here, those 2 designers imagine a dystopian world where a lack of resources in the future forces food rationing. That's where some other designers and scholars, including Ahmed Ansari, just answered on the Design and Violence website that those dystopias, they are actually the daily reality for other people, like in Pakistan, for instance. And the fact that this design is actually critical, but doesn't think about their own situation, their own worldview, is actually an issue. And this critique of the field was formulated by and better and strongly formulated by the Decolonizing Design Group. Their archives is still online if you're interested. But mainly their critique was that those speculative design project, they're often addressing first world problems. And when I organized a talk in Centre Pompidou in Paris on this topic, Tiffen Kazitani, the researcher, formulated this sentence, this phrase: "The only chair that truly changed the lives of millions of people during the 20th century is unfortunately not in this book." And do you know which chair it is? It's the wheelchair. And again, it's another example that being creative or being critical doesn't prevent you from this this problem of being unaware of your point of view, of your blinders, of your privileges. So being critical is important, but avoid to be self-centered. Then being ambiguous is something very important in order to have artifacts that trigger debate, because those ambiguous artifacts, if they are ambiguous, it means that if you succeeded in making ambiguous artifacts, it means that your artifact is telling different things. It's defending different point of views. It's embodying different realities or different interpretations. The opposite would be this kind of project by I. Hasegawa, which is I want to deliver a salmon or a shark, and we have a person which is delivering a salmon, which is or maybe a red tuna that is that was a protected species, and she's delivering it in order to eat it just afterward. So it's critical. It's triggering reactions, but yeah, maybe it's the wrong ones. And when you make people voting on this scale of the preferable and the non-preferable one, everybody's voting on the same side. While in the CRISPR food project, people were, when they were seeing this baguette, which is organic but genetically modified, then they were a bit confused, and they didn't know if it was preferable or not, and they had to talk about it. And then the project was ambiguous. It was revealing political frontiers, as Chantal Mouffe says. It was making the usual group of we all agree because we are a group. It was turning it into two different groups or several little groups. It was reconfiguring the political frontiers. So yes to ambiguous project, but beware of too much provocation. Phew. Okay, let's move to the last part. Designing for deviation. Thanks to the previous tips I showed you, I developed a lot of different projects, but I encountered two main limitations. One, the people who participated in my democratic initiatives were not the ones who held the power. So I decided to work with the policymakers. Second, change is difficult. It's counterintuitive, and it's bogged down by many other obstacles. Then I decided to work with psychology and cognitive sciences. In the deviations labs, I work with Thibaut Gressinger, which is a cognitive scientist. And thanks to this, I tried to move beyond my. Are you still right? Yes, I hope so. I tried to move beyond the limitations, the two limitations I gave you. I will show quickly this project, but I will show it through the initial framework I gave you. It's called Prison at 50 degrees. It's about extreme heat wave in the future in the prison system in France for the Ministry of Justice. So we went in prison and ran fiction writing workshops with different kinds of publics. And in this framework, we helped to define the core of the disagreement through the project in order to solve or to address the individual level of this conflict framework, in order to have people actually really well understanding what is the conflict about. So one way to do this was to yeah, I forgot to talk about the reducing noise also. We tried to reduce noise. We tried to have people less to be more in a good conditions to have discussions through one choice, which was to have those to not have direct debates with them, but to have ludic experiences of sci-fi writing. But we also had them. We tried to build confidence and trust. We established relationship of trust by discussing what the project would be used for and what they would say. And by allowing them to say anything they wanted, we kept them anonymous. So yeah, that was, yeah, my slides were inverted, but those choices were made to reduce noise. Then we tried to produce part of the project to better define the core of the actual disagreement, to better define the terms of the debate. For that, we made an investigation, and I'm gonna pause for a minute. But yeah, no, it's okay. Let's start. Let's keep going. Let's just drink for a second. Yes. So we made investigations and we gave, let's say, a lot of materials for the stakeholders to understand the effects of heat waves on prison. We made synthesis of our arguments. We also made sci-fi little stories, little scenarios about the future consequences of those phenomena. Then, after addressing those two parts of the framework, we tried to address how to engage the audiences. For this, we met with the various types of actors who are generally in conflict in order to get their participation and to produce altogether those 71 propositions of resolutions of the conflict, which were a conflict about how to actually improve the condition of living and in prison, while there are so many constraints and so many arguments for not doing this. But I won't go too far in the description. Those 71 propositions were gathered in 4 groups, 4 scenarios. That's the way we engage the audience. And then we found ways to facilitate the debate. And mainly we've done that through this tool. This tool is a tool to evaluate each proposal according to different criteria. It has to be done collectively to position one's opinions and experience the divergent views of others. My slide's not moving. Yes. The thing we didn't do is how to reach a larger audience. We didn't do this phase yet in the project, but other people did. The Greenpeace campaign, for instance, but also those 2 videos that I will let you search online. I hope you're still alive. Now, to end this presentation, I will improve and complete the framework. This is the full version I came up with. And I will just describe 1 or 2 parts that are new. When you want to reduce the noise, if you want, it means reduce all the thing that blocks people from entering an actual proper fruitful debate and useful conflict. You have sometimes to diffuse mental overload. Here in one of our projects, we did some kind of yoga, a meditation phase before a workshop, before a discussion, which were full of conflict, I can tell. And that was very useful. In order to deconstruct argumentation bias, in the CRISPR project, this little guy there was an expert of argumentation bias and was there in the animation to facilitate people's reflection on those. We also improved debate culture, the know-how to debate well with the tool I shown you earlier. On the question of bringing more data on the problem, we gave those sheets with a lot of infos, as I told you earlier. Then moving, jumping to this section there, the number 4, J. All the rest I already told them, I presented them in the previous part of the presentation. So here, you can use some projects, not my project, and there's the address. Yeah, there's enough information to search online. Some of projects use data visualization to help people position their own opinion. And that's quite a good idea. And then there are also approaches to spark curiosity about the other's point of view. I will let you check the Be Another Lab, that's their name. But also this crazy documentary of a Muslim in the US meeting the white far-right representative with a crazy documentary. I'll let you find it by yourself. And all those different parts of the framework are actually design roles. You could answer the mission of being a designer is I try to work with conflict through those different roles. Maybe you can build new ones. So I'll let you with this, trying to make your own interpretation of all that, and I will see you later for questions. Thank you very much, and enjoy the day.